There's a version of the artist we've all agreed to believe in, tortured, untamable, indifferent to what anyone thinks, painting in solitude, writing through the night, releasing work into the world with the detached cool of someone who genuinely doesn't care if you like it. And then there's the artist who refreshes their notifications compulsively, who rewrites the caption 6 times to make sure it doesn't come across wrong, who says, yes, of course, to projects they hate and then quietly suffers through them, who has approximately 17 unfinished creative works sitting in draft folders because finishing them would mean putting something real out into the world where someone might reject it. That artist is far more common, and no one talks about why. The first thing to understand is that making things is an inherently vulnerable act, not metaphorically vulnerable, actually physiologically vulnerable, the kind that activates the same neural threat responses as social rejection. When you create something and put it in front of another person, you are, at the most primitive level, offering yourself up for evaluation. The work is yours. It came from inside you. Whatever they think of it says something, at least in your nervous system's read of the situation about whether you're acceptable. People-pleasing is a nervous system response. It's the body's attempt to preempt rejection by making yourself necessary, agreeable, non-threatening, easy to love. The irony is that artists, people whose entire practice is built around expressing something specific and true, are often the same people who have the most finely tuned rejection detection systems. They feel things more acutely. They've usually spent their formative years being a little too much or a little too different. Sensitivity, the very thing that makes someone an artist, is also the thing that makes people-pleasing feel like survival. Here's the other piece. Most artists learn to create inside institutions that rewarded compliance. Think about how creative people develop their skills: schools, writing workshops, music programs, art classes. These are environments where your work is evaluated by an authority figure, and the approval of that authority figure determines whether you advance, whether you get feedback, whether you feel like you're good. The most adaptive strategy in that environment is not authentic self-expression. It's learning to read the room and produce what gets praised. A writing student who notices their professor lights up for realism will often unconsciously start writing realism. A young painter in an academic program learns which aesthetic choices get hung in the good hallway. The training for art is, bizarrely, often also training for people-pleasing. You get so practiced at reading what others want from your work that eventually you can barely hear your own instincts underneath all that external noise. And the reinforcement is strong. Getting praise for your work feels incredible. Getting criticized feels annihilating. So the nervous system does what it always does. It optimizes for the praise. What makes this especially complicated is that art requires an audience. Writing a novel in a vacuum and never showing it to anyone is not really the full loop of being a writer. Music that no one hears is an incomplete act. Art exists in relation, which means artists are perpetually in a position of need. They need someone to receive what they've made. And needing someone gives them power over you, at least in the psychological arithmetic of someone who hasn't done the work of separating their worth from their reception. People pleasers know this arithmetic intimately. The logic goes, if I make you happy, you won't leave. If you don't leave, I'm safe. Artists translate this into, if my work moves you, you won't reject it. If you don't reject it, I was worth the vulnerability. The problem is that making work specifically to please an audience almost always produces worse work. The work that moves people is usually the work the artist was terrified to make. Specific, strange, risky, theirs. The work designed to be universally palatable tends to be universally forgettable. This is the central trap. The very strategy the people-pleasing artist uses to feel safe is the strategy that makes their work less likely to land. The cost of this is significant. You cannot simultaneously preemptively self-destruct and also stand fully behind your work. You cannot apologize for the painting and also expect the painting to hold the room. And then there's the specific cruelty of what the internet has done to all of this. Artists used to get rejection in private or semi-private. A letter from an editor, a quiet pass, or they could metabolize it before deciding what to do next. Now rejection is a metric. It's a view count, a like ratio, a comment section. It's public and it's permanent and it updates in real time while you're trying to live your life. That environment doesn't just trigger people-pleasing tendencies, it actively trains them. The algorithm rewards content that performs well with audiences, which means artists who work in public spaces are receiving constant feedback on what the crowd wants, and that feedback loop is faster and louder than any internal creative voice can compete with. You post a vulnerable piece, it underperforms, and your nervous system files that away. You post a safe piece, it does numbers, and your nervous system files that away too. Over time, without active resistance, you stop making the vulnerable piece. What no one mentions is how people-pleasing also distorts the artist's relationship with their own taste. It's not just that you start making different work, it's that you start wanting different things, or rather, you lose access to what you actually want because the wanting has been outsourced to the audience for so long. You genuinely can't tell anymore whether you like the piece or whether you think they'll like the piece. The two have collapsed into each other. This is one of the quieter forms of creative damage because it's invisible from the outside and confusing from the inside. The artist isn't lying when they say they wanted to make something more accessible or more commercial or more polished. They did want that by the time they made it, but that want was shaped by years of conditioning, not by an authentic creative instinct. The original voice didn't disappear overnight. It just got quieter and quieter each time it was overridden, until eventually it stopped competing. Reclaiming it requires something uncomfortable, making work that you don't know if anyone will receive well, sitting with that uncertainty without resolving it through performance or preemptive self-deprecation, and doing it enough times that your nervous system learns that the uncertainty won't kill you, that the silence after releasing something isn't the same as rejection, that you can survive being misunderstood, being ignored, even being actively disliked, and still know what you made was true. Most people pleasers have never been allowed to learn that, so they keep optimizing for the approval that never quite makes them feel safe. And the real work, the terrifying, necessary, specifically theirs work, stays one more draft away from done. The way out isn't to stop caring what people think. That's not possible, and anyone who claims it is either lying or creating in genuine isolation. The way out is a more precise kind of caring. It's the difference between caring whether your work connects with the people it's actually meant for and needing every single person who encounters it to approve. One is craft-oriented, the other is anxious. One makes the work better, the other makes the work safe, which is not the same thing. It's also the difference between making work from your truth and then releasing it, versus making work in anticipation of someone else's response. The former is creative. The latter is a performance of creativity that is actually at its core a request for validation. Artists who do the deeper work, the actual psychological work, not just the craft work, eventually learn to locate something more stable than audience approval inside themselves. Not arrogance, not indifference, something quieter, a kind of internal yes that exists before the external one does. You make the thing. You know whether it's true, you release it. What happens next is information, not verdict. That shift doesn't happen automatically. It usually happens after enough cycles of trying to please everyone and discovering it doesn't make you feel safe anyway. The audience is happy, but you feel hollow. The piece got good feedback, but it wasn't your best. You said yes to the commission and resented every minute of it. People-pleasing doesn't keep artists safe. It keeps them small. And small is its own kind of suffering. Slower, quieter, and harder to name than rejection, but no less real.